We've personally had experiences where somebody ordered 12 grams of borax, somebody delivered it to across 150 kilometers, only to get the order cancelled at the last moment.
So for years, she's been cheated
Absolutely.
of almost half the quantity of
50-60%
the produce. Hi everyone, welcome to another series of InsideOps. Today we're interviewing Arnav, who's the CPO at Jiva. Thank you, Arnav, for taking the time and having this chat with us.
Pleasure being here.
Thank you. So let's just start this off with, if you can share a little bit about your background, the journey that led you to this point of working as the Chief Product Officer at Jiva, right?
I think I've had a pretty weird journey into getting to lead product Jiva. So I'm basically an electrical engineer by education, and terrible one at that. Post my engineering, I worked as a backend developer, building mobile backend as a service for a company called Kony that got acquired by a bank called Temenos.
Yeah.
Post that, I had a very short stint at Traction. That's a startup that tracks other startups.
Yeah.
So I was managing the PaaS, API management, MBaaS, DevOps kind of feeds there. It was somewhere between Kony and Traction where my product journey actually started. So it was basically at an NGO, which is run by a senior of mine at college. His name is Abhishek Syal. The NGO is called Rise Impact. So it was into providing educational aids for specially abled or differently abled people. So
nice.
that's how the entire product journey started. And that was just part-time. Like I was volunteering, trying to figure out what needs to be done there, build some educational content for people with disability, like people couldn't see. So a lot of braille-related stuff. Post that, I joined Locus. Locus was an early-stage startup back then. Now it's pretty big. It was into supply chain optimization. So I joined there as a PM, worked there as a PM for a while, but then we realized that there are a lot of operational nuances that are very difficult to solve just from a product angle. So we established a team called deployment, followed by solutions, followed by engagement management, and pretty much everything that needs to be done to implement a B2B SaaS.
Yeah.
Did that for a while, led a few auxiliary products. Like I think I was the 11th employee in there, spent about 5.5 years. Post that, Jiva happened. So I was connected with Jiva by the ex-CPO, Akash, and he probably convinced me to join Jiva. That's how things have worked. I've been in the system for about 18 months now. Things look good.
Nice. What's the one thing about you professionally or personally that people don't know that would be like that you'd like to share with people? Share a little bit about yourself, either personally or professionally. Either one works.
Professionally, so a lot of people think that my role requires me to be extremely well organized. I have to plan a lot of things much in advance, probably follow some frameworks.
Yeah.
But personally, I suck at it. Like my time management is pathetic. Probably if I have a problem that I'm working at home, I'll probably spend the entire day doing that with absolutely no regard to what the time is or how much time I have spent on it. On a personal level, I'm a cat person. Like a lot of people do say that I don't look like one. I don't know how cat people look like. But yeah, I absolutely love cats.
Nice. Same here. I love cats. I love all animals like dogs, cats. But I had a cat briefly for a little while and just fell in love with cats myself as well. Help us understand a little bit about Jiva. Let's just first, for the audience, let's sketch out like broad business model so that that conversation makes sense, right?
So I'll probably have to take you through a bit of a history for everyone to understand what Jiva does. It's not very unique, but it has been built in a very unique way. So Jiva is not like every other typical startup, which is, let's say, promoter first or founder first. Like we are a corporate-backed startup. So we were started as an entirely owned subsidiary of Olam through Olam Ventures. When we started off in around 2020, we had a hypothesis that we'll probably try to digitize the farmers. And we specifically wanted to work with and create a step change in the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. Naturally, we started introducing tech in there. We built out a farmer application, started advising farmers on how they should be farming. And that fell flat on its face. Like in a couple of months, we realized that advisory is not taken very well. Because who are we? Like farmers come at you with the mindset that, hey, you are sitting in your own ivory towers. You have no clue how business runs. You're coming us and giving us advice. Yeah. And we've been running this business for 150 years. We've been farming the same crop over and over again. So that's when we had a bit of a realization that it's not very easy to digitize the farmers directly. Now, this was also coupled by the fact that we had chosen Indonesia, which is one of the largest growing economies, and in terms of rural economies. Mm-hmm. You probably have a very large number of smallholder farmers in Indonesia. We started off with a crop that gives us multiple yearly cycles so that we can experiment and maybe iterate a bit faster.
Makes sense.
So we were dealing with probably one of the cheapest crops out there, which is grown by a very large number of people. And what we were trying to do was moving a bit away from the advisory piece. We started thinking that what if we start providing credit to farmers in the form of input goods? Input is essentially everything that goes inside the earth, like seeds, insecticides, pesticides, seed treatment, whatsoever. And if farmers buy products from us, we could give it to them at a cheaper price price, and then we'll not take the money from them. We'll take the harvest from them when they are probably harvesting it. And once we've taken the harvest, we'll probably sell it to somebody in the market. Now, this link is capital intensive. Like you are putting a lot of money up front so that you can provide these services to the farmers. What we started noticing then was that it works. Like people reach out to you, they collect the inputs from you, but there's no guarantee that they'll sell the harvest to you. And once you try to introduce some legal framework into this entire system that has been operating on trust for the past 100 years, it becomes a very difficult ballgame. And doing that as a tech-first player is not an easy way to do it, because every single transaction happens offline. So naturally, we had to step into offtake, which is purchase of harvest as well. So we started purchasing harvest, and the way we tried doing that is by building a network of rural entrepreneurs. Like people who may not be farmers, but maybe within the farmer's family, maybe in the same ecosystem, maybe a few entrepreneurial people who could be like traders and start procuring, have a bit of influence, a bit of knowledge, and that's how things started moving for us. Like fast forward 2 years, we have dissociated these hypotheses as well, while we still provide inputs on credit and purchase harvest. But these two work streams work independently. So as of today, like if I were to define Jiva, we are a farmer services platform. Grand vision is to improve the livelihoods of farmers. And how we do it is through this model that we have, a physical plus digital model. Wherever possible, we do digitize the farmers. But wherever not possible, we digitize the nearest touch point.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's what the value proposition is.
Nice. And if it's comfortable to share, what's the, like just a ballpark, what is the scale that we're operating at today at Jiva?
Sure. So we started offtake purchase, which is the predominant part of our business, in 2021. We started off with just one crop, that is corn, and in one province called South Sulawesi. Pretty small. It's not the largest corn growing region, but it does have a lot of intermediaries, so we could disintermediate and add value there. This was in 2021, and we did a smallish procurement then, probably somewhere of the order of anywhere between 30,000-40,000 tons. 30,000-40,000 tons is small.
Understood, yeah.
We've tried to grow like 4x, 5x last year. We have expanded to every single corn growing region in Indonesia. And we've also started moving across to multiple crops. So now we're just starting working on chili as a crop. And the idea is to expand chili as well towards the later end of this year. But the idea is to get profitable as of now. The unit economics is sound. We are in the right trajectory. But the idea is to focus a lot more on profitability as we go.
Got it. So this is a fairly operations heavy business model, right? Yes. So what sets Jiva apart in the way you run your operations?
So I touched upon this bit in your previous question. The phygital model itself is a huge offering.
Yeah.
So let me just explain how the entire ecosystem works in the first place, right? So let's assume that you're a farmer and you have a field. Typically, smallholder farmers in Indonesia might have anywhere between 0.25, 0.5 hectares of land. That's extremely small. The harvest might not even be enough to fill like a small Tata Ace or the size of a truck.
Yeah.
Now, these farmers, they typically sell their harvest to a local buyer who would potentially sell it to a bigger local buyer, who would potentially sell it to an even bigger buyer. And then it would hit the market in the form of, maybe selling something to a mill or anybody who would want to procure. In corn, the kind of corn that we deal with, it's dent corn, which is primary component of animal feed. So for us, the buyers are potentially feed mills. Now, when we talk about the distinguishing factor here is how do you procure this entire thing? And I'm talking only about offtake right now. I can probably go about inputs as well. So what we've started doing, we started off by building a small network. Now that has expanded to over 5,000 people. These people are relatively tech savvy. They're also very entrepreneurial. They're enterprising. They want to take this risk. They want to procure things. But a lot of them lack working capital. So I'll give an example in terms of like absolute money, INR, IDR maybe. A typical truck, which is 10 tons, would have corn which is worth around 50 to 60 million IDR, which is maybe 3 to 4 lakh Indian rupees. Now, if you're a farmer and I'm a collector and I want to procure this from you, you'll probably expect some money upfront. The average earnings of these collectors is around 30,000-40,000 INR. So we were talking about 5 to 6 months of salary being given out as an upfront payment to the farmers to procure. So this is the part of the problem that we tried solving first. We provided working capital to the local entrepreneurs. We trained these local entrepreneurs into what they are supposed to do, how they're supposed to behave, what are the value value as they can provide the farmers. But in addition to that, they know their business. Like they are pretty well aware of how the geography works, how the agri thing works. So what sets us apart is first our ability to give out these procurement advances. The thing here is that anyone with money can do it probably, right? But there's also a lot of risk, and when we talk about a few 100,000 tons, the risk is huge. So we have built in our own systems internally which determine the credit worthiness of every transaction that we have. So that is what allows us to sustain. If you can potentially prevent, default or fraud in these kind of cases. First, building a sort of a phygital network. Second is the entire advanced management and financial management. And the third part is how do you ensure that these people keep transacting with you? So, if it's just a plain old purchase harvest and you'll get paid kind of a model, it's going to be a pretty boring thing to do. And then somebody else comes and offers a better price.
Yeah.
People will move. So we've also started building in really small incentivization programs for these people, wherein we've tried to gamify the experience a bit, where each of these local entrepreneurs move across tiers in the system.
Nice.
And with every tier, they unlock newer privileges. Yeah. So, as an entrant to the system, I may have cash advance worth maybe 1 truck. But when I consistently grow with the system, if I've spent a couple of seasons, maybe I'll get 2 trucks worth of advance or 3 trucks worth of advance. And there's also a lot of social incentivization that happens. Like in Indonesia, people typically, they have hopes and aspirations to go for Umrah. Like we start campaigns around Umrah, where, for the top performer of over a few seasons, we'll probably give them a fully sponsored trip. So we were able to probably do this well. And that's sort of been the differentiating factor for offtake.
Got it. Nice. Very interesting journey. And I think that every product owner or entrepreneur has that, fear at the back of the mind that where is the moat. But I think that in your model, there is so many different things at play that complexity in itself is a fair bit of moat, right? You've got offline operations, you've got digital, you've got the whole phygital model. So this is a business that involves, and you mentioned being able to profile the people in terms of their credit worthiness. So there's a lot of different components coming together to make this happen, right? And what challenges did you face in scaling, like from the first sort of MVP that you did with the corn farmers in a small region? From that point on, scaling it pan Indonesia, like you mentioned today, that you've got farmers pretty much all across Indonesia, especially in this corn for this particular kind of crop, right? So what challenges did you face when you were scaling from that first POC or MVP to then taking it across Indonesia?
I don't think I'll take this question as in past tense. There are still an immense number of challenges.
Of course, yeah.
And then some challenges continue to be there since day zero. And then probably they'll continue to be there for the near future as well. So the first part was setting up this network, right? We have values, like Jiva values, like most companies out there have certain mission statements or vision. We do have a few Jiva values. The primary Jiva value for us is creating a step change in the livelihoods of farmers. Now, when we think about Jiva as a transactional entity, it's probably much easier to start procuring goods from traders and bigger buyers rather than trying to focus on the farmers. It's more economical. You really don't have to worry about the supply chain. You have to manage less people, so there's an extremely less amount of headache there. One of the biggest challenges for us was to build this network of micro collectors, or Sahabat Jiva as we would want to call them. Like profiling them, hiring them, giving them the value proposition that, this is exactly what is expected of an ideal micro collector. I don't think we have nailed it down to a level where we can say that, this is exactly the persona of a local entrepreneur that I would want, because that will differ by region. A very interesting thing that happens when you start getting into profiling people here is that there is intent, there is capability, and there is age, and there is gender, and there is a lot of things that come into play. A lot of our micro collectors are women and children, wives and children of farmers who are already there. Now, they have been managing the household finances. So they are a lot more enterprising and they want to do this. But the profiles are drastically different. You could have a person who's like 65, who's very, very respected in the society, and that person is a micro collector. And there's also a 17-year-old kid who just creates videos on TikTok every other day. That person is also a micro collector, right? So now the adoption of technology in such a diverse group of people is crazily difficult. Like, who do you build for?
Yeah.
So keeping things standardized, like building standardized things that can be used across these varied micro collector persona, and keeping the strength of this micro collector persona good, that's been a very, very strong challenge. The other part is, like in India, we really cannot imagine a life without a smartphone, right?
Yeah.
Like we had a lot of revolutions, and then there was Reliance, and then Jio came in, and now data is much like pretty much free. In a few geographies in Indonesia, especially the ones where we started off with, we had a 35 35-40% penetration of smartphones.
Nice.
So even if you want to build an app, who are you going to build it for? And the moment you give people an option to call somebody on the phone to place an order or to call somebody on the phone and get something done, why would they even bother to move to a product? So those have been really, really interesting challenges to solve. On top of that, when you go out and meet people on ground, the kind of stories that you get to know, and I'm going to harp on a lot on the value that we have. How do you standardize the entire offtake collection process that it can be followed across different geographies? Corn is a relatively simple entity. You have certain quality parameters. You go there, you measure the quality, you measure the moisture, and there is some value that comes in. But because of a huge number of intermediaries in the system, it is plagued by cheating. Right, so we have literally had a lot of stories. There are anecdotal evidences. There are data points around that we have now. We talked to a farmer. We told her that she has around 6.5 tons of corn. She was extremely surprised. She started crying. We asked why. She goes like, I've been selling to this collector for the past 20 years or so. I've always been told that it's 3.5 tons.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So
for years, she's been cheated
Absolutely.
of almost half the quantity of
50-60%
the produce.
So now when you enter into such a state, why would people want to work with you? You are a volume player. That could be a great moat. But you are fair. Like everywhere that we go, even in newer geographies, and I kid you not, like the word of mouth travels like real fast. We were active only in one geography, and then when we started launching in another geography, somebody who was a relative of a collector in this geography already knew about us. Yeah. And they were like, Jiva offers honest scales. Now, this is a lot of pressure to deal with. Like, how do you offer honest scales seamlessly across these different geographies?
Yeah.
Right? And another bigger challenge in terms of scaling is seasonality. Like typical SaaS companies, we really don't have a fixed milestone to chase. Flipkart here has a milestone called Big Billion Days. You know where exactly it's going to happen. You build things towards it, and your product scales magically. You have IPL happening in Hotstar or JioCinema, they scale up. Most recently, the season in East Java got delayed by a month because maybe there was not enough rain. Maybe people planted late. So how do you take into account these considerations when you are doing your annual planning? Right? So these are like real life challenges. And the moment you change a crop, the parameters change. The quality parameters for corn, for chili, for wheat, very, very different, right? The supply chains are different. So
this is way more complex than it appears on the surface, right? You've got an audience of a varied persona ranging from a 17-year-old to a 70-year-old. You've got challenges with, whether some people are using smartphones, some people you've actually enabled workflows via phone calls if they don't have smartphones, and then the seasonality. So there's a whole. I mean, this is a very, very challenging sort of business. So my hat is off to you.
It's a very real business. We don't know if we have cracked it or not, but like we're trying to do what we can. Scaling any business is a challenge, right? The only typical nuance that comes in with commodities or trading is that there are physical people and geographical nuances, even socioeconomic nuances that are involved.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
those are a few challenges.
So in the middle, with all of this, so what is the sort of North Star metrics that you have, or how do you know what metrics do you use to measure the success of your operations, right?
Metricization is relatively simple, right? You start looking where the money is. So you start focusing a lot more on, like for us right now, profitability is a very core metric.
Yeah.
We are looking at margins because, and there's an internal joke that we've made in Jiva. Like every time anyone asks us in terms of why don't you have an office in Bangalore? We're like, we're a thin margin business. So the margins are really thin. So profitability, which is a gross contribution or gross margin, is something that we like. That's the holy grail for us. But there are secondary metrics like volume and margins are definitely what everybody looks at. But we consciously look at the health of a network. And why do we look at the health of a network? Is because this is actually an operations-heavy business. And the way we manage it is we have these local entrepreneurs, the micro collectors or Sahaba Jivas. They're managed by a group of people who are full-time Jiva employees. Now, the way these people manage this huge bunch of maybe 10,000 micro collectors, it's really important for us to keep these ratios healthy. So our ratios of internal resources managing an external operational team is extremely critical for us.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we've tried to build metrics around the levels of manual intervention that we have in workflows, and we consciously try to lower them down. Like when we started off, the entire cash advance or procurement loans process was offline. As a matter of fact, when we were selling inputs, the first set of inputs were sold on WhatsApp. Like people who used to place an order on WhatsApp and somebody used to key in the data on our side. Now the idea is to keep on reducing this manual intervention. Because we are targeting huge scales, it's extremely important for us to make sure that there is minimal intervention there.
Got it. And so, as the chief product officer, like, how do you ensure the interdepartmental, coordination or workflows that have to happen to enable operations and very complex operations? How do you manage that? Like, making sure that operations align with the business strategy, but there are so many different moving parts and pieces to this, right? So there's probably a lot of collaboration in real time that's needed, or keeping things in mind from one perspective while trying to make an SOP for another. How do you
Like I think
any frameworks, mental models, etc., that you use to?
so we can definitely come up with frameworks, and there's a lot of things at play. How do you categorize your product build? How do you define what are the business level objects? How do you translate a lot of these business level objectives into roadmaps? But like, I'm yet to meet a founder or maybe a leadership team that has actually cracked this. It's extremely difficult. Our business teams have North Star metrics for volumes in GC. But because of the nature of the business, it's extremely difficult for us to understand what exactly enables a volume in GC. Maybe adding a new feature on the app, would it impact that business? Maybe, but there's a pretty high chance that it might just prevent people from coming onto the application because there's 2 more clicks added. Like, I think I'm probably cribbing a bit more at this point of time, but our team is almost 100% remote. And we started off during COVID. So while we had all of our operations in Indonesia, all my PMs, engineers, and designers are based out of India. And for a good part of 1.5 years, we had not even been on ground to understand what's exactly happening.
Oh, that's the most difficult situation
That
to
is
be
the
in
most
for a
difficult
builder,
situation.
right? Like, to build for people or an environment that you're not familiar with, you don't understand their thought processes,
Yeah.
their psyche, their mental models.
So what we've started doing is, like, unlike quarterly roadmap prioritizations or something, we have just brought it down. So there are business as usual tracks that continue running on that time frame. We are very quick to iterate. For that, we have to have implants from a product team on ground. Like, there are people who have been on ground for 7-8 months at a stretch to understand the business. We have sort of started hiring for some very peculiar roles that we otherwise thought, we never knew that those roles even existed. So one of these roles is a service designer role. Now, the role of a service designer is not to look at the UI UX. It's basically to understand that if you have a certain way of doing business, first, is it the right way of doing business? Second, what are the enablers that are needed for doing this business? And then what is the incentive for the operations team to let product in onto that? I think we did a good job there. We were able to crack down this role pretty fast. And in terms of our iteration plannings and all, what we have done is that we have business counterparts for every product work stream, right? So it's extremely easy to map a business outcome to a product goal. So it's been working well for us. And like, I was actually, since you talked about frameworks, I was actually looking at a framework where you have collaboration on one axis and you have accountability on the other axis. So if you have a high collaboration between teams and you have an extremely high level of accountability of a product and a product owner in terms of delivery, you are basically trying to be an outcome facilitator. If you have a lower amount of collaboration, it means that individual teams are working in silos and they're trying to build something on their own. But you have high accountability, you become an outcome owner. We are on the facilitator side. So the product team does not own business metrics, but the business team also does not own the metrics. That's a joint responsibility of a product and a business collab. So this is what we have tried to do. We have business counterparts for every product work stream. We have product implants. We have service designers. This sort of gives us, some leeway into trying to build a roadmap. But we are not rigid. We are not extremely rigid about, we want to introduce this particular feature to impact maybe 1 million users. We don't have 1 million users. So yeah, that's probably, I'm not sure if it's a good answer, but this is what
No,
it
I
is.
think that's great. The way you guys are working sort of like in tandem, right? Like, they're always connected, and a lot of breakdown of the walls and silos. So you're working as a joint team instead of operations and product. It's a combined team that's trying to solve it.
And the team has also gone pretty huge in size. Like, over time, like, I actually got on the number of people through our internal HR portal. I just totally lost track of it. We are about 150 people in the product engineering and design division, the PDG group. But on the whole, we are like 700 people. There are like 500 people who are in Indonesia. So what we also do is we have internal showcases, and we try to have a lot of buy-in sessions when we're trying to build something on the product side. Realistically, when you start an operations heavy business, product will probably trail the business for a while. And a lot of times what a lot of product owners and founders try to do is make product lead right from the beginning, which may or may not be a good idea. You may have an all-star product that you want to build, but if it is not used by people on ground, then it's worth nothing.
And if it doesn't contribute to the business, then
So I think we've been a lot more realistic on that sense. So we did trail, and we're happy to trail. Like, if we're able to improve efficiency in our processes, Nothing like it.
Nice. Awesome. So what advice would you give to, entrepreneurs or product builders in the agri space? The agri space is taking off like a rocket everywhere around the world, right? Agri-tech, there's so many different startups trying to take different approaches to that market in India. And of course, all over the world, there's wherever there are especially small holdings, there is a lot of agri-tech activity that we've seen go on, right? So what advice would you have for other product builders who may be building in other geographies, but focusing on the agri-tech market?
Actually, multiple points to think about, right? When we talk about agriculture as a segment, naturally a lot of things are going to be thin margin. And the default way in which a lot of founders go about building businesses to build funnels, pour a lot of money at the top, and then hope something sticks and then we derive some value out of it. That'll be good to get things started. Your acquisitions work out fine. But in a business like ours, repeat usage or repeat transactions is what's going to be key, right? And that's typically for any SaaS in general. But in ops-heavy businesses, you have to consciously start building growth loops from the starting. I'll give an example of the MC network, right? We have about 7,000-8,000 registered micro collectors with us. Do all 7,000-8,000 of them transact with me every season? Probably no. If my cost of getting another 5,000 is the same as the cost of getting the first 5,000 and my attrition rate is fairly high, it'll take me extremely huge amount of time to get to profitability. So like my advice would be, because the margins are thin, the focus on profitability should come much sooner than other geographies. The second advice could be around understanding user personas. While again, it's a pretty generic advice, but like we talked about micro collectors.
Yeah.
Like when you start, like a typical way of building a product is you build for the 80% and then you keep on adding iteratively what is for the 20%. Right? It is not that linear in agri segment. Like we have a wholly owned subsidiary in India called Agri-Central that has about 10 million users. It's an advisory application for farmers. One of the features that we have on the app is called Crop Doctor. You just put the camera on a crop. It tells you what disease exists on the crop and what's a possible solution. Now, for the same crop in India, let's say versus Indonesia, the diseases are going to be different because Indonesia is extremely tropical, India is tropical.
Yeah, climate and conditions, environment. Yeah.
Right. And when you have such dynamism in such small things, do you want to try and solve everything all at once? Right. A lot of founders, because you want to get your valuations really high up, you want to show diversification, but ensuring that your model sticks in one single geography is extremely important here.
Yeah, so don't try to eat the elephant in one go. Yeah. Take a bite and make sure you're able to digest it.
Absolutely. And I was talking to a few people about the AI in the agri sector itself. Right, it's a hugely abused term because first of all, people find AI very exciting, and then a lot of founders find it very, very daunting. You don't really have to build another ChatGPT tomorrow. So maybe take smaller steps. Make sure that your unit economics are sound. We tried running input e-commerce, plain e-commerce. Farmers place an order for an item and then you deliver it and then you get the money. We've personally had experiences where somebody ordered 12 grams of borax. Somebody delivered it to across 150 kilometers only to get the order cancelled at the last moment. So while I can be very happy about the number of orders that came in, but you know what happens with margins here, right?
I'm familiar with that problem. That similar problem happens in e-commerce in India a lot with respect to RTOs, etc. So
the thing with regular e-commerce is that when we're talking about India as a geography, people are now accustomed to using Myntra or Jabong or Flipkart or Amazon. They are familiar with the concept of buy now, pay later. They're familiar with the concept of cash on delivery, and you have 55 other ways of making a payment. Prepayment, delivery fee, a lot of it goes well. When you introduce these things in the rural agricultural segment, people get surprised. You have a delivery fee. I don't want to buy it. We tried selling insurance. People were like, how much is it going to cost? We were like, maybe 150 rupees. They're like, give it to me. Give me 150 rupees. I don't want the insurance. So profitability, building for a very small geography, taking baby steps at a time on those, and then trying to build growth loops as soon as you can.
So any advice on how to manage large ground teams? We work with a few customers that have large ground teams as well, and I know that is a very different ball game. Any thoughts, any ideas that you can share with other teams that might be building ops heavy businesses which have large ground teams?
Start managing by exceptions as soon as possible. Like a lot of times, and especially with the financial transactions coming in, people are extremely hesitant to let the system make a choice. They always want to have that second level of manual intervention, that I want to validate every single transaction that goes through. The thing with this approach is that, while it's in the best interest, that people have their heads in the right places, but it builds habits. So before you get to a state where you're big enough that the habit is too hard to get rid of, focus a lot more on automation. everybody in the product segment wants to build new products. I want to build new products.
For sure, yeah.
But it's an extremely important part of my job, at least, to ensure that the process flows are automated. The next part is invest in change management. And this is something which I have been advising people left, right, and center. Like when you introduce a product offering that makes somebody's job a bit different, I wouldn't say easier or difficult, maybe a bit different, people resist the change. So investing a lot in probably training and educating people into why is something being implemented is very, very important. So those are the two things I would probably say.
To focus on the why as much as on the what. So, you're piloting with Locale right now. Can you share a little bit about how you're using Locale? What kind of use cases? You mentioned exceptions monitoring, and that's what we do. Like that's a core strength of ours. But I'd love to hear from you how you're using it.
Yeah. So, like I touched upon the entire offtake piece of business, right? And the way it is managed. We have farmers. Farmers sell to Sahabat Jivas or the collectors. The collectors are managed by a group of people who are activation coordinators, or you can assume them as mid-level managers for us.
Yeah.
Now, the idea is to keep these ratios healthy. So as we scale, one manager would probably have to manage a very large number of micro-collectors who would in turn interact with a very large number of farmers.
Yeah.
And when we talk about offtake in general or corn harvest purchase in general, there's working capital that has been deployed. So tracking the working capital on where is the working capital, has the right person received it? And also tracking the supply chain of the good that we are procuring. Has the truck left the farm gate? Is it at the feed mill? Has it been sort of unloaded? Have the financial transactions taken place? Now, each of these steps has some level of uncertainty with it. And when we talk about farmers, they're extremely concerned because they have to get paid.
Yeah.
It's their probably semi-annual, if not annual earning. For micro collectors, again, going with the same number that I told earlier, like the working capital required to procure a truck is 6 months of salary. So in order to redeploy the capital, they need to be aware of exactly when are they going to receive the capital back, that they can redeploy a part of it. They can have commitments with newer farmers that they're going to procure. And all of this has to be managed by a really small team of internal mid-level managers. And each of them are responsible for a reasonably high amount of working capital. So what we are using Locale for, one of the use cases, is how do we keep this mid-level manager updated with maybe the 5 most important things for this person today. This person can go through every single transaction, but that's going to take ages. If there are defaults, if somebody is tending towards a default, like I told, we have built an internal system to keep this, track the status of every creditworthiness of every transaction that happens.
Yeah.
How do you use that in real life? Like if this person should approve or reject in advance. So this is one of the angles that we're using Locale for. The other is towards the other line of business that we have, which is around inputs. So input selling, we started directly to farmers. Then we introduced that, the phygital system that we have built, the micro collector network, these are really good salesmen. They can actually go and execute a pretty easy sale, and they can directly talk to farmers, maybe sell to farmers, or even get entrepreneurial enough to purchase things from us and then run their own little stores. Now, what is the status of stock that we have? Like, can we do some procurement maybe a bit in advance, looking at the market trends on what products are selling, what are not? And then recently we also started selling to retailers. So that's a B2B kind of a model where we sell to smaller retailers.
Yeah.
Now, servicing the retailers, like any typical FMCG company, you have to have sales executives, you have to have sales coordinators. These people will have their targets. You need to give them maybe a journey plan, a lot of stuff around that. But communicating what exactly these people need to do for, let's say, the next 5 days, or getting a manager to look at what are the outstandings at various retailers at any point of time, maybe giving pre-nudges that, let's start recovery now. This person has not placed an order in the last 15 days. What is the status? So otherwise, if we were to build a lot of this stuff in-house, it would be easy to build. It's not very complex to build it out. But the number of iterations that we would potentially have to go through to come up with a solution would be fairly large.
Yeah.
Locale is giving us the advantage to test a lot of these things out. So those are the use cases that we have. We're thinking of even implementing this in terms of recruitment of our MC network. That could be another possible use case. But yeah, that's been the idea.
Nice. Did you face any challenges with adoption of Locale from the ground stuff? I know that, some of our customers that we speak with, they're apprehensive that ground fleet or ground staff are not very receptive to softwares, right? And that's one of the reasons why we've made Locale as invisible as possible, because our alerts can go out directly on WhatsApp or the communication channel that they use, and they can action them from there, right? But I just wanted to understand, did you face any challenge from the on-ground team in terms of adoption of Locale?
So the ground stuff is actually challenged by any software that you try to implement. Like it's not something specific to Locale or Jiva or anything that we would say. The good part is the part that you just mentioned, like it being invisible. Like a lot of our users who are getting notifications on, let's say WhatsApp, are not aware that There's Locale doing that. It's Jiva doing that. It's the same system. So you don't really have to worry about causing a disruption in people's ways of working just because they have this additional thing to think about that there's another tool being used. So, and also, we're just in the early stages, but so far we've not seen any operational impact or people coming back and saying that it's hard to use. It's also because we have aligned people, because like a lot of these people who are receivers of the notifications that are being sent out, or the people who are monitoring, they have their incentives aligned to the information that they get through this system. So it is a relatively easier thing, but the invisibility part is really great.
Awesome. So what you're saying is because it helps them do their job better and make more money, and that reduces the resistance, friction, etc.
And also the number of touch points. Like if you deploy a really complex software with a really large number of touch points, people find hard to manage the change, right? With this, it's the kind of information that they want in the format that they want on an application that they are using for leisure.
And exactly when they need it.
And exactly when they need it, yes. Yeah. So I think it's been fun.
Nice. Thank you for that. Would you recommend Locale to other businesses, and why? Like, what would you say to them?
I actually have.
Nice.
So
nice.
I would definitely recommend. See, specifically ops heavy businesses, product and heavy ops. You need something to start with. Like, we have been extremely big proponents of a lot of no code. Like, wherever possible, we've used Retool, we've used Airtable, we're using Locale, right?
Yeah.
Investing in some of these tools lets you make do with a relatively small team size. I'll just give an example. If I were to, let's say, start a pod that essentially focuses on my communication frameworks around, everything that needs to be communicated to my ACs or microcollectors or so, I'll have to invest some money on that pod, right? And I'll have to manage a backlog, and I'll have to groom it, and I'll have to probably plan for what needs to be done next. With Locale, of course, there'll be an initial integration, which will take time. You have to identify a use case well, but I don't need that pod, right? So that is the kind of advantage that we do get with Locale.
Got it. Awesome. So I know in the interest of time, I know we only, borrowed half an hour of your time. So I'm conscious of the time and I don't want to jump into too many more questions. There's a bunch more swarming around in my head that I'd love to ask, but maybe we'll save that for, another time.
I think I took a lot more of your time.
No, it's perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time, Arnav. Really appreciate you coming and sharing with us, what your experience has been and your journey and Jiva's journey and, how it got to where it is today and all the challenges that you faced in the middle, right? So very insightful. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It was fun.